we'll just open it up for questions.
Mick, you want to lead us off?
Sure. Jonathan, I wonder if you just maybe start with just sort of, it's 6 weeks now until that weekend of the 6th, 7th. Maybe just walk through what you're planning on doing with the team in terms of workouts and practicing from here on out.
Yeah, we get about 2 weeks leading into a 4-week training camp. And so these next 2 weeks we'll be in the weight room. We can do some kind of skill development and walkthroughs, which we'll do a few times this next week and then the following week. And then really the bylaw says you get 29 days before your first game to do 25 practices. And so that's the same as it was last August. Really the difference for us now is just managing school being in, which is fine. You know, we'll get some things done in the mornings that way. So really 2 weeks of weight room, some walkthrough, and then we'll get into a normal training camp for 4 weeks, getting into the first game.
So would that be the Monday? Do you have an official date then for the first day of camp then? When would camp start?
It'll be, I got it here. We're still waiting on finding out if we play Friday night or Saturday. And so it's really a 1 day window there. I think it's around the 8th of October.
Around
like
and then
start.
How physically ready is the team to go through what you're asking them to do at this point?
I feel pretty good on that end, especially knowing we got another 2 weeks to continue to train. I mean, we've been training under this 12-hour rule for almost a month now. Now, we've had a couple interruptions with the fires and the smoke, but we've had a majority of the crew around these last, like I'm saying, the last month. And then we get 2 more weeks of it to get ready for a training camp. So I feel these guys will be in pretty good shape headed into training camp.
Is everyone on campus at this point that you would
I think
expect?
it's about 95%. We're still we actually ran into a little bit of sickness the last couple of days for some reason, but yeah, 95% of the roster's on campus.
Okay. Is Hamaka Rashid looked like he said he's in? He's going to play. Is that your understanding too?
It is. Yeah, he's been at everything working. We actually talked a couple of days ago, and he's feeling confident about, attacking this season. So that's my understanding.
And no one else is opting out?
That'll be something that's, now that this thing's set, that'll be to find out. But those are going to be a personal decision on for guys, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
Hey, Jonathan, Ron Callan here. How excited are you to finally get this going? I mean, it's the third different schedule, but maybe third time's the charm here. How excited are you, and when will you find out about the schedule?
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I mean, just meeting with the team even today, seeing them working out this morning. There's a genuine excitement across the entire program. Now, players, coaches included. Been a lot of work figuring this out and just feeling confident that what we've arrived at is a good plan. And so we're looking forward to playing. And then finding out exactly the schedule, Scott might have a better idea on when exactly the order of teams we're playing comes out.
That'll be sometime early next week.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Jonathan, do you have any update on Jordan Whitley and his prognosis, if you expect him, how he's doing?
Yeah, I know he has not been working out, and he's still working through some things. I don't have an exact diagnosis of this, that, or when will return. I just know he's not currently working out with us.
Jonathan, what about Trayshawn Harrison and Trey Lowe? You said they would be good to go for January. Now that you moved it up, where do they stand?
Yep. So that kind of now continues the waiver process, and we're in works of doing that. We've gotten back and forth with the NCAA on that, and there's a few things they're still requesting, which we're working out information-wise. So we don't know their status currently, because you're right on. They would be good to go January 1 with a year residence, but we've been working through the process of putting a waiver in for both of them.
Scott, they
Are,
said,
are there any changes?
you go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I was just, are there any changes you're planning on making at practice, just given what you're going through right now versus a normal training camp? Is there any other precautions you're taking with this camp versus, say, last year?
Yeah, I mean, there will be, we know the days we'll practice, like I'm saying, in training camp, but we'll heavily conversate. Me, Mike McDonald, our strength coach, Steve Gall, Dr. Ackerman, the training room, coaches, and we'll look at the load starting this training camp, and we'll see if it's going to be different than a normal August like last year. And then, sure, the protocols around the place, the building, still COVID-19 is a real thing, and we're going to take every precaution that way. So that'll be definitely different than last summer.
Scott, they said yesterday in the press conference, I think it was President Schill that said, the genie's not necessarily out of the bottle here. Like if there's, a bad community spread among various schools or areas, they're willing to kind of put the kibosh on this again. The one thing that I'm curious about, though, that I couldn't get in yesterday is, does community spread equal team spread? If there is something that occurs within, say, the community of Corvallis, but there isn't an outbreak within the team, what is the approach there for the athletic department and for the university?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. We're informed by our local health authorities on, we look at it team by team, or is there a spread within a team? We're all under protocol, and mind you, a different protocol, a more stringent protocol than the population of the community. So that is different. We'll be, as we're on weekly calls with our county health group. They've been great partners in this. We'll assess the issues as they arise, and there will be issues. There will be positives, and we've got protocol to deal with them. But those are team by team and not, although some ways related, right, to the community spread. Specifically, we would be looking at the team.
So just as a quick follow, how far does that exemption that, OHA has given, teams like Oregon and Oregon State, how far does that go if, you guys are okay in-house, but, there's measures that are being put into the normal population because of, a situation in which there's a rise of cases locally?
Case by case, we'll look at, deconstruct every single case and talk through it and look at it and look at the risk factors, case by case.
Thank you.
Scott, football is roughly $55 to $60 million in revenue, at least that was my understanding. How much revenue can you expect to get out of 7-game season and maybe any postseason?
You broke up a little bit, but I think the question was how much revenue do we think we can get out of football season, Nick? Is that what it was?
Yeah, how much revenue do you think you can get out of this? Yeah, it's breaking up on my end. I feel like I can barely hear anything.
Yeah, you're breaking up on me. But in terms of revenue, the one thing I'll tell you is we're going to start looking at that. But, now that we're playing, we got to get all our games in. I'll tell you this, that as it relates to television, we're close to being able to max out with the games we're playing. Not quite there, but very close to the max for the ESPN Fox dollars based on a schedule that we're looking at. Obviously, there's all sorts of revenue gaps because we're not going to have fans, we're not going to have concessions, parking, donations, all that. I haven't put a pencil to it, and right now, I just got off a head coach's call with all my head coaches, and the first thing we did was shout "Go Beavs" and celebrate a little bit. Now it's time to execute and get the work done, and we'll look at the finances. Once we get the schedules completed, then we'll really put a pencil to what it could look like, what it could mean. Obviously, it will help. It won't cover anywhere near all of it, but it'll certainly help. More importantly, we get our coaches and student athletes back to what they do best, and we'll do it safely as we can. But you have to be determined on what all that looks like exactly, Nick. But that is at least a bit of news there that we're close to the revenue capacity on on the TV from Fox and ESPN. Not quite there.
Jonathan,
Will-
sorry, Nick, you want to go?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, Jonathan, I'd imagine in a normal year, kind of keeping a group of guys aged 18 to 22 to consistently be responsible is a challenge in itself. Now that the stakes are a little bit more raised there, I mean, obviously you guys can't sequester these kids, but is there anything that the team is kind of doing to try and push that personal responsibility angle a little bit more, given the fact that all it takes is, one or two people to bring something into the team facility like this?
Yeah, we've talked at length as coaches, and I do think we've got great leadership on this team from our players, and they've been voicing similar things of understanding the choices they make outside the building is going to affect everyone, and how much this team and the season means to them will reflect in the decisions they make. And look, it's tough. I mean, and it's not just the 18 to 22-year-olds. I mean, it's the 41-year-old head coach. I mean, all our choices we make outside of here will really hopefully help us stay safe and healthy and playing games.
I'd like to just add to that. We're in returning to play. We're committed as an athletic department to lead this university in making the right choices. Not only that, but for our student athletes to be what I call health champions and modeling what it should look like for other students. And that's certainly our goal. It is our goal, and we continue to message that to our student athletes.
Scott, Steve Priest, question on that. We were talking about 6 or 8 games, and we settled on 7. What was the decision process?
And we'll sort that out next week as it relates to the final schedule. But when can we start, and how much time is there to ramp up, and how condensed can you be? So we felt like what we're modeling is doable. We can execute it within the time frame relative to when we're starting, and it fits. Not a lot of room for error, to be honest. It's going to be fairly tight, but and that's why it's so important for us to continue to test and ramp that up and follow our protocol. But based on calendar, Steve, and what we felt we could actually pull off.
Then in the next week or two, will you come up with a revised criteria on the bowl selections as far as games you have to win, et cetera?
Yeah, we'll look at anything from tiebreakers to bowl selections to all of that, and that's the fun part of this, right? It's now we get to put the pieces together and understand how to declare a champion and what all that looks like. So that will come right on the heels of the actual schedule.
Hey, Coach. This is AJ McCord from Coin. Quick question. I hopped on late, so if you've been asked this, I'm very sorry. But one of the things that we're seeing in the NFL is that week 2 just produced a rash of injuries, and Pete Carroll with the Seahawks, as they're doing all these studies to find out if that's because of OTAs and off-season work not being training able to be as intense as it tends to be. You guys have 7 weeks, 6 to get in real game shape. What are you guys doing to sort of get ahead of that? And have you learned anything from watching the NFL or other college football conferences or other conferences start play first that you guys are going to implement?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a I think accurate observation talking about the injuries after week 1 in the NFL. We're definitely trying to take advantage and talking to other colleges, programs, got a lot of coaches on the staff that know other guys working other places and following that closely, seeing things they felt they've done well and maybe mistakes they've made. On our end too, I think we will be monitoring in the amount of training we're doing for these first couple of weeks and kind of where we're at. Talked a little bit already about kind of seeing how we feel we're out after these 2 weeks as we head into training camp, and then designing our practices off of that, because it's a fine line, and this is a game you want to get into shape and play physically, and so you need to do some of that during training camp to be prepared for week 1, week 2, but at the same time you're not trying to do too much. So we're definitely trying to learn from others, but we'll keep our eye on ourselves as it goes, and we'll be ready to adjust.
Jonathan,
Thank you.
what are some of those mistakes that you've heard from other programs, if any?
Yeah, I won't say specific which programs, but even just in practice length, maybe the early assumption is just kind of, well, we'll get back to practice. We're going to practice like we normally did a year ago, and we'll probably look at that closely of the amount of time from day 1 to day 2 turning into 6 and 7, maybe going to, give you an example, like normal practice is around 2 hours, 2 hours, 15 minutes. Well, I don't know if we're going to do that out of the shoot day 1. Maybe
How hard is it? Oh, sorry. How hard is it to kind of limit that when guys are probably really hungry to just get back at it?
Oh yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. You know, especially the first practice, there's always so excited to go. And that's when you get some of the hamstring injuries when they haven't been practicing their first full practice. One thing we are considering actually doing is in the first practice or two, actually working in the red zone. And so, your distance is just not as far. You're not going to run as far when the ball's at the 10-yard line going in. And so actually introducing that earlier than we normally would to hopefully mitigate some of the injury issues.
Scott, I know they talked yesterday in the conference call about the possibility of 9 a.m. kickoffs. There was kind of a discussion. Yeah, I know. There's kind of a discussion, though, about the logistics there and of having tests on Fridays and testing out coaches and players in that little waiting period that is required, or that you kind of need to parse who's positive and who's not. And a 9 a.m. kickoff might throw a wrench in that. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts as Oregon State football in regards to the possibility of 9 a.m. kickoffs, and what are the challenges there now that you're implementing, these additional testing measures?
Yeah, no, really, really good question. When you think about the television landscape and not having fans, there is some more flexibility. I don't know that. Well, I'll tell you, we've not raised our hand yet for a 9 a.m. So, but there, because the fans aren't involved, at least not having to travel to the game, there's some more flexibility to do some things there. So we haven't gotten in the weeds, frankly, Andrew, on protocol around that, because we haven't really raised our hand as somebody, somebody that's necessarily needing to jump into that pot. So at this point, I think overall we can all find a bit more flexibility because fans are not involved. And when you think about a Friday night or even a Thursday night game, you're always balancing the TV exposure with the fan experience and getting fans to the game. And that's out of the equation. So that's helpful. But we haven't at this point raised our hand on a 9 a.m.
Hey, Jonathan and Scott, it's got to be crazy in the world of recruiting because of all of this. I mean, Jonathan, how does this fit in for you with recruiting? Obviously, good news you're playing, but how complicated is this to try to deal with that when this other stuff's going on?
Yeah, it's been something to navigate, even all the way back starting in March. They've extended the dead period recruiting-wise till January 1, limiting our travel places and obviously recruits coming on campus. So we'll just continue to find ways to bring Corvallis to our recruits. On the flip side too, it's interesting because a lot of high school players aren't playing during the fall, and so there isn't as much tape to watch or prospects out there. So we're going back on last year's tape and then just building relationships through Zoom, FaceTime, obviously on the phone, writing letters and continuing all of that to engage as many prospects as we can.
To piggyback onto that question, Jonathan, what is it going to look like? Because it looks like the guys now are getting an extra year. How does the class of 2022, you start looking at that if they don't change the 85?
Yeah, that is going to be interesting. I wish I had a great answer for you, but if that's the case where everyone does get an extended year and you've got a year to get back to 85, roster management is going to be something on your exact numbers on how many 22s you have scholarships for. And we'll see what it looks like here in a year, but it's something in the back of our mind as we go through this.
Scott, this is Annie Peterson from Associated Press. I know that you guys had to make some kind of difficult cuts in June in terms of the athletic department. Is there a possibility now that we're bringing back football and basketball that you might be able to bring some of those positions back?
Yeah, unfortunately not. financial gap is so significant that without being back with fans and looking at all of our revenue streams at a much higher level, there's no way to fill it. So at this point, no.
Scott, Annie brought up basketball, and I'm just curious, November 25th, what does that mean as far as a potential first game for Wayne Tinkler and Scott Ruick, their teams? Where does that stand?
So I think, we're obviously very excited, Ron. The fact that we're in alignment with the rest of the country to get started, as you all know, the NCAA voted to move basketball back from November 10th to the 25th. They'll start here soon in contact practice, and what has happened is much like football, we're now reacting and responding to the decision that was made, and very soon, maybe as soon as next week, we'll have a basketball schedule modeled as well, and then in doing so, and in thinking about that, Ron, we're thinking about who can keep the MTEs and multi-team events based on when they are. Some of them are prior to the 25th and will move, others won't move. Lots to determine. There's still, we're doing the best we can to keep alive all the conversations and contracts that we've had in place to make the best decision and respond to what that model ultimately looks like. As an example, is it 18 league games? Is it 20? And then knowing that we have a cap of 27, including an MTE, 25 without, we'll know how many we need. And we've been continuing our staffs, both men and women, basketball coaches, staffs have done a really nice job of keeping those conversations alive so that we have those options when we nail down the schedule. So very fluid. We'll get it done. We'll be in a good spot. Non-conference is important. Obviously, in playing non-conference, the individuals we play have to rise to the same level of protocol that we are involved in. That's how we have to do it for the safety of our student athletes, and we will. But fluid, we'll get there, waiting on the model, the final model to be determined, and then we'll plug those non-conference games in.
I know,
Scott,
Scott, there was some
Scott,
scuttlebutt I know, Scott, there was some scuttlebutt kind of out there about the possibility of doing, bubble non-con sort of tournaments at the beginning of the year. Say that were to happen, is that something that you guys would explore for either the men's or women's team if there's, some type of bubble non-con tournament that happens in Las Vegas, for instance?
Yeah. Right now, I think we'll explore anything. Obviously, it has everything to do with the safety of our student athletes. I'd like to get as many non-conference games inked at home. Really would this year. I'd like to travel as little as possible. We will travel some, but I'd like to limit that the best we can. And then those events that we do play in, just ensuring that, and even today, the NCAA came out with a national standard and protocol around basketball, and so that'll all be followed, and that's important. There are MTEs that are moving towards that bubble concept, bringing teams in. Obviously, they'll have to rise that level of testing protocol for folks to enter them, and we'll entertain that where needed. And so it's really a balance of what's popping up, what do we have, what have we saved in the non-conference, what went away, and what gaps do we fill based on the number of Pac-12 games. And so a lot of arithmetic going on until we make that decision. And fortunately, that decision should be made very soon.
And just as a quick follow-up to that, speaking of protocol, a lot of the other leagues, especially for football, have released, the protocol list that would, I guess, constitute postponing a game. Has the Pac-12 put something together like that yet? If you have X amount of people out at this position group, you have to postpone, or is that something that's still being worked on right now?
Yeah, it is being worked on. It is, and locally for us as well. I mean, you're going to be looking at a Pac-12 guideline as well as your local health authority around that.
It's Orlando over at KGW. Quick question on testing and where you guys are at in terms of training and getting the equipment necessary. When did you guys get all the equipment, that type of deal?
Yeah, no, appreciate the question. The page is turned and we're beginning a new chapter, and that's called Execute. And so we have the machines. They came to us here I believe just yesterday for Quidel Antigen machines. And so we are in a sort of a workforce all hands on deck mode right now, because there's really several things that have to be handled. One is assisting the county in contact tracing, and so our trainers have been trained to do that. Another is daily temperature check-in line, and that line's getting longer as our student athletes are back, and so we have to have workforce there. And then third, to your point, is training, and so we're doing some cross-pollination and getting that training done as well. We think we'll be ready to go in terms of training, having the machines, and being ready to administer those tests sometime early next week.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Jonathan, Ashley Conklin from the Register Guard. Is Tristan firmly entrenched right now as your starting quarterback? And if so, how do you kind of see the depth chart shaking out after him?
I wouldn't describe it as entrenched as the starter. He came out of the 4 spring practices we had as the leader in the clubhouse. But now that we get a full training camp, we got some time to sort that out and allow guys to compete. I'm kind of curious, not just at the quarterback position, where every position group is at. Got a lot of time to do Zoom meetings, learn the playbook, and each group, I think, is going to be pretty competitive when you look at it per position. Maybe some of these younger guys, because they've had this extra time of meetings to learn everything, might be making some jumps. So we want to make it pretty competitive come training camp.
Just kind of as a follow-up to that, you lost some pretty talented people who are now in the NFL. So who are some of the people that maybe you're looking to step up at wide receiver and tight end for you this year?
Yeah, we did lose some guys that are playing now, and happy for them. It's starting with tight end. Tegan Quatariano obviously has played a lot for us. We're counting on him in a big way to continue to do some things in the run game and the pass game. Luke Musgrave played some as a true freshman last year, and count on him to make some huge strides in year 2 moving forward. And, we feel confident with those 2 guys contributing. And then we've got some younger guys that we brought on that were, like I'm getting at, had a lot of time to learn the playbook, anxious to see what they look like. Receiver-wise, Hodgins was a big-time player for us. But then you look at the rest of the group, all those guys are back, and a lot of those guys made some contributions. We did feature Hodge because he's a big-time player, but we can spread the wealth. I see us spreading it out more this next year with guys like, obviously Teron Bradford coming back, but Colby Taylor made some big catches, Champ Flemings, Josiah Irish. I hate kind of listing names because I'm going to forget some, but Tyjon Lindsay. We feel like we got some depth at receiver to be able to spread the ball around and push it down the field.
Scott, would you consider busing any of the football road games this year?
Yeah, I think everything is going to be under consideration. And when you think about the safety neck of our student athletes, if we determine that might be the safest way to go, we'll look at it. So that all that is in the works right now, but I think we're going to look at every conceivable option to make sure our student athletes are where they need to be, when they need to be, as safely as they need to be.
What about flying in day of game?
We haven't discussed that. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but something that with everything else in a new day needs to be at least considered. We want to be guided by science, and as we have all along, and the data. And so questions like that will best be answered by working with our medical group to help assess risk. And are we putting ourselves in a better position that way? And that's, at the end of the day, we'll rely on that information to make informed decisions.
Jonathan, are there any players that aren't going to be available at the start of camp?
Well, in 2 weeks, guys that I know for certain, man, I think Nashawn Wright has a chance. You know, he was scheduled to kind of be going in early October when he had his surgery. So I think, and Whitley, I'd be kind of surprised where he's currently at. Outside of those two guys, I think can't think of anybody else.
Scott, where do you stand on the possibility of getting an extra year for your players? You must have some mixed emotions about that with the problem getting to 85 scholarships.
Well, the NCAA has granted us the opportunity to extend that for a year. So really, the decision is easy. Making it work is tough. It's the right thing to do. We will do it. The challenge, as Jonathan has spoken to earlier, Carrie, is managing students coming in, students you thought were leaving aren't leaving, and managing that roster. And that's the challenge. But it is the right thing to do. We are committed to doing it if student athletes want to. And then it does it does create challenges on the other end. But those challenges we are willing to accept.
Everybody good? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Love the questions about football. Who's going to start? Quarterback controversy. Love it. Let's go. See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.